African storytelling. Storytelling is a way to pass down history through generations for any culture. They actually have real names, parts that help the audience understand the world and history. In the modern world, storytelling is a technique such as work chain. The audience participation makes up the best presentations of African stories. This means that it doesn't just go for African stories, but any story that has been passed down to one another is passed down to generation, which means you can grow up listening to it, and when you have kids, it's passed down from generation to your great grandfather or great back in even ancient times, that they have learned stories to actually have parts that help people understand and real names. So it's not all make believe. People actually understand them, and it's kind of like a life lesson.
African story is an art. They often use instruments, masks, and costumes to entertain while telling their stories. They teach a historical lesson.
Now, the art of storytelling, it can be through stages, it can be through paintings, it can be through anything. And what I like about it personally is that you use instruments and masks to make it more dramatic, like costumes while telling stories. It's like they're going to remember you. It won't be like a boring story to where you just sit around and tell. You have entertainment, you have something to explain your story, something to make your story, give it a little taste, like a little pop. And they teach lessons to everybody in the village.
People are not interested or will not listen unless the story is what interesting.
Okay, basically, this just is a fact, not just for African storytelling, but for any storytelling. And the storytelling that we're going to tell you 2 stories about this that we have, it's going to be entertaining. They don't tell boring stories, because boring stories people will not listen to. They won't really get it because it's boring and slow. You need dramatic emphases, and you need people to explain what's happening, when it's happening, and how it's going to go down. The audience, African storytelling often has this type of call and response interaction to begin focused on the audience. They're storytelling from Africa, and those 2 practice all over the world. Now, the audience who have been witnessed or who have seen the African performance of what they do when they tell stories, it's like a response to the crowd. It has the audience focused on what they're doing of storytelling from Africa, and who's practiced all over the world. So basically, it's giving the audience some time to let them see of what they've done and what they're doing and what they have been through and what they're going to tell us what happens. The stories that have happened that are real. So it won't be all make believe. It'll be real enough for us to actually feel it and get the chance to enhance it. So.
Noxie the Spider Show. Familiar players such as Noxie the Spider showed in many African stories. He had lots of friends, but he always stayed in trouble. He uses talent and humor to get him out of trouble. Everyone loves the story.
The Noxie the Spider Show is the man who lives in the village. He has one beautiful wife, a lot of sons, a lot of daughters, and pretty much his pro is that he's funny, he gets everybody laughing, nice guy, humorous, best personality. But his con is that he's very sneaky, kind of troublesome, but he can always get out of trouble with his wits. So I think that's good. And this story basically just shows you as a life lesson that if you have a little bit of to you, you can get yourself out of a lot of trouble. But not a lot of trouble, but in his story, he didn't really get that much in trouble because he was smart enough to get himself out of trouble.
Now anyone can tell an official griot per village. Try to steal or entire hours of griot from another village. War could break out. The griots did not work in fields. Their job was to tell stories.
Now, this passage talks about the villagers. The villagers were like griots. You had a griot per village, like a storyteller for a person. And basically, they just tell stories. They tell stories about what happened, and just like any other person, if you was to steal somebody's look or somebody's what they're doing, somebody's story about what they told, it's offensive, and a war could break out because you can't go around stealing stories and tell them to another village what they already heard, and they go back and tell the griots, and that's how war breaks out. So they didn't really work in the fields or do hard labor. They just told stories. That was their job. It was an easy job, to entertain people and tell them interesting stories.
The griots were storytellers in the ancient kingdom of Ghana. After dinner day, the people would hear the sound of drum or a rattle. There was a story to be told. All the people had gathered around the central fire and settled down to listen.
Basically, the griots were as I told you before in the passage, they just told stories to the villagers, and after you ate dinner, you know how like you watch a movie, their movie was like storytelling, and the Griots basically told their movie for them, like in stories, and you would just like all huddle together, like in a little fire thing, and you would listen, you and your family, like it wouldn't just be you and your family and other families too, so it would be like, it was like a little like movies, but movies in front of you as reality. So yeah, this is the African storytelling, and we're gonna tell you one more story to make it all interesting. This story is called the Sasala. It's about this king, and one day he was hungry, so he sent his people to get the famous taboo. Now his people told him you can't have the taboo because, you know, if you do, then, you know, stuff bad will happen to you. He's been warned about it, but he didn't care because he was the king, he wanted his way. And so when he ate the taboo, people basically told him that you'll be cursed for the rest of your life, your children, your children's children, your wife, and basically his whole family is going to be cursed because of this. And they even sung a song that said, basically, I'm going to read one quote for you. The ants would dance around your fire and twist up the dirt. Which basically means that, you know, he's cursed all from eating the famous taboo he was warned about. So stories like this kind of entertain you,